Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at the CISO daily update for November 15th, 2024. And as always, we're going to be giving you a rapid rundown of all the latest breaches and vulnerabilities. Really anything interesting that we find in here that we think our listeners should be aware of?
Yeah, and it seems like every day we hear about another data breach. This report certainly doesn't disappoint.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the sheer number of breaches that they highlight here, it's just a stark reminder of how relentless the threats really are these days. We've got breaches affecting Alltech Consulting, Demand Science, URL Login Pass. We've got LinkedIn, Microsoft Power Pages. And all of these organizations have been compromised in different ways.
Yeah, and I think what's really striking to me is the variety of targets and the information that was stolen. We're seeing everything from job seekers' data to corporate emails to sensitive records on a major cloud platform. And I think it really underscores the point that no organization is immune to these attacks, no matter how large or small.
Yeah, it's unsettling, right? And I mean, one of these that I found particularly troubling was the Demand Science breach. They exposed data from a system that was decommissioned 2 years ago. You would think that once a system is retired, that the data on it would be securely erased.
You would think so, wouldn't you? But it just goes to show this highlights a really critical weakness, I think, in many organizations, and that's poor data lifecycle management. Companies really need to have clear procedures in place for how to securely delete data that's no longer needed. Otherwise, they're just leaving themselves wide open to these kinds of breaches.
Yeah, you're leaving the treasure chest unguarded in the public park, basically.
So we've talked about the scale and the variety of the breaches, but what about the people behind these attacks? This report actually features a couple of stories that I think provide a good glimpse into the motivations and the tactics that some of these cyber criminals are using.
Yeah, and the first one is the case of Robert Purbeck, who used aliases LifeLock and Studmaster. He targeted various organizations, medical clinic, a police department, and even an orthodontist. An orthodontist. I mean, that's a little baffling to me. It doesn't seem like the most, lucrative target for a cyber criminal.
Right. And it just underscores the fact that not all of these cyber attacks are driven by, purely financial motives. Some attackers are driven by, personal grudges maybe, or a desire to cause disruption, or just, the thrill of exploiting a vulnerability. But in this case, Purbeck gained unauthorized access to the systems, and he resorted to harassment and extortion.
Yeah, so unpredictable motives and a wide range of targets. Not exactly comforting, is it? But shifting gears a bit, the report also details the case of two Nigerian nationals, Akande and Oyetunji. They were charged with a much more financially motivated scheme.
Yeah, this is a really good example of the growing problem of organized cybercrime, often operating across international borders. These two individuals used a type of malware called the Warzone RAT to hack into tax preparation firms.
And they ran this scheme for 5 years. They filed over 1,000 fake tax returns, trying to steal more than $8 million in refunds. I mean, that's a pretty sophisticated operation.
Absolutely. I mean, it shows that cyber criminals are constantly evolving their methods and becoming more sophisticated.
Yeah, so we've seen the volume of the breaches. We've seen the range of the attackers. Now let's take a look at some of the specific techniques that are being used. And one that caught my eye was something called sitting ducks.
Yeah, this technique is particularly concerning because it involves hijacking legitimate websites and domains. And researchers have discovered over 70,000 domains belonging to businesses, government entities, even universities that were basically turned into weapons by hackers.
Wow, 70,000. That's a crazy number. How do they even manage to pull this off without anybody noticing?
So it all comes down to exploiting weaknesses in the domain name system, or what's also known as DNS. You can kind of think of it as like a giant phone book for the internet. So if an attacker can manipulate the entries in this phone book, they can redirect traffic to their own malicious servers without the website owner even knowing about it.
So you go to visit a website that you think you know, but you're actually being sent to a fake version of that website that's controlled by the hackers.
Exactly. And what makes this technique so insidious is something called rotational hijacking. They only actually use these hijacked domains for short periods, and then they either abandon them or pass them on to other attackers. So it's like playing a game of whack-a-mole. It makes it really difficult to detect and shut down.
Yeah, that's pretty scary stuff. Speaking of scary stuff, though, the report also details a case of suspected Chinese espionage that sounds like something straight out of a spy thriller.
Yeah, this is a case that raises serious concerns about the vulnerability of critical infrastructure to nation-state sponsored attacks. According to a joint report from CISO and the FBI, Chinese government-backed hackers were able to infiltrate the networks of several U.S. telecom companies.
So what were they after? Were they trying to steal customer data, financial records?
It seems like they were after something much more strategic. They were stealing call detail records, they were intercepting private communications, they even gained access to information that's related to law enforcement requests.
So this isn't just cybercrime anymore. This is espionage on a national level.
Hmm.
And it really raises the stakes, I think, because it suggests that we might be moving into a more dangerous phase of cyber warfare.
Yeah, it's a sobering reminder that cybersecurity isn't just about protecting individual data, it's also about national security and even global stability.
All right, so we've seen a wave of data breaches. We've seen a range of attackers from individuals to nation states, and some truly alarming techniques being deployed. Now let's turn our attention to some specific software vulnerabilities that we think everybody should be aware of.
Yeah, staying informed about these vulnerabilities is so critical because these represent weak points that attackers can exploit. And the first one we'll discuss is a real nail-biter. It's a Windows zero-day vulnerability. It's tracked as CVE 2024-43451, and it can actually be exploited with a simple right-click.
A right-click? That sounds almost too easy. I mean, how does that even work?
So it involves specially crafted malicious files that are often disguised as harmless documents or images. And when a user right-clicks on one of these files, the exploit can be triggered. And that potentially gives the attacker complete control over the system.
Wow, that's scary. And to make matters worse, the phishing emails that were carrying these malicious files were reportedly originating from compromised Ukrainian government servers. And the threat actor known as UAC0194 is suspected to have ties to Russia.
Yeah, so this really adds another layer of complexity to the situation, and it illustrates how geopolitical tensions can spill over into cyberspace, where cyber attacks become another tool in the arsenal of nation-state conflicts.
I mean, it feels like cyber attacks are becoming the weapon of choice in the 21st century. But there's some good news in this case. Microsoft actually released a patch for this vulnerability on November 12th. So if you haven't updated your Windows system recently, now's the time to do it.
Absolutely. Patching vulnerabilities as soon as possible is one of the most effective ways to protect yourself. Delaying updates is like leaving your front door unlocked overnight. You're just asking for trouble.
Yeah, no argument there.
Yeah.
But the Windows vulnerability isn't the only one we need to worry about. The report also highlights some critical flaws in GitLab and Kubernetes. That could lead to unauthorized access and a whole host of other exploits.
Yeah, these cases underscore the importance of having a comprehensive security approach. It's not just about patching individual vulnerabilities. It's about having secure configurations, strong access controls, robust monitoring systems, and a plan in place for how you're going to respond to incidents.
It's about building a fortress, not just patching a few holes in the wall.
Huh.
And finally, we have a cautionary tale about legacy D-Link NAS devices. These are network-attached storage devices, essentially external hard drives that you connect to your network.
Yeah, and they're a prime example of the risks associated with using outdated technology. There's command injection vulnerability, CVE 2024-109-014, that is being actively exploited. And unfortunately, these devices are end of life, meaning that D-Link is not going to be issuing any patches.
So they're sitting ducks, basically. That's a problem, especially since these devices often store large amounts of sensitive data.
It is, and it really highlights the importance of replacing outdated technology with newer, more secure alternatives. Holding on to old devices might seem tempting for cost reasons, but the security risks often outweigh the benefits.
It's like driving a car with bald tires and faulty brakes.
Yeah.
It's an accident waiting to happen. So before we delve into the bigger picture implications of all of this, I'd like to pause and just kind of ask you, the listener, a question. What stood out to you so far in this deep dive? Is anything making you rethink your own security practices?
It's a good time to kind of step back and think about the bigger picture. These individual breaches and vulnerabilities we've been talking about, they're really just symptoms of, I think, some deeper systemic issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the specifics of each case, but we really need to step back and ask ourselves, what's going on here at a fundamental level? What are the root causes behind so many organizations struggling to keep up with this evolving threat landscape?
Well, a recent survey by Panacea found that a staggering 61% of organizations in the US and UK have experienced breaches due to ineffective security controls. And what's even more alarming is the financial impact. An estimated $30 billion in losses annually in the US alone.
Wow, $30 billion, that's a massive number.
Yeah.
What factors are contributing to these kinds of staggering costs? I mean, is it simply a matter of organizations just not investing enough in cybersecurity?
It's more nuanced than that, I think. Security leaders are under immense pressure to deliver strong security, but they often lack the resources and the data to do so effectively.
So it's a resource problem. You're being asked to build a fortress on a shoestring budget.
That's certainly part of it. The survey also highlighted the growing personal liability that security leaders face. 90% of them are expected to provide, stronger assurances about their security controls. Yet 57% lack reliable data to even back up those claims.
So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Held accountable for security outcomes, but without the necessary resources to actually achieve them.
Exactly. And this pressure has actually led to a surge in indemnity insurance, as security leaders try to protect themselves from the potential fallout of a breach.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable that they would seek some kind of protection. But it feels like a Band-Aid solution. It doesn't address the core issues that are making organizations so vulnerable in the first place.
You're right, and that's why the call for unified cybersecurity regulations is so important. The National Cyber Director, Harry Coker Jr., has been a vocal advocate for this, trying to streamline regulations and create a more consistent and effective approach to cybersecurity.
So what's the rationale behind this push for unified regulations? Wouldn't that just create more bureaucracy and red tape for organizations to navigate?
Well, the current regulatory landscape is, I think, very fragmented and confusing. It varies widely across sectors. And this complexity makes it really difficult for organizations to understand and comply with the rules. And it also hinders effective enforcement by regulators.
So the idea is to simplify the rules of the game.
Oh, yeah.
Create a level playing field for everybody.
Precisely. Unified regulations would streamline compliance efforts. And that would allow organizations to focus more on implementing, robust security practices, rather than just trying to decipher this patchwork of regulations.
Okay, that makes sense. But cybersecurity is such a dynamic field, it's constantly evolving. Wouldn't rigid regulations quickly become outdated and potentially stifle innovation?
That's a valid concern. And that's why any regulatory framework that we put in place needs to be flexible and adaptable. It needs to be able to keep pace with these rapid changes in technology and the threat landscape. The goal is to find that balance between, strong security and manageable compliance, fostering innovation without sacrificing security.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act. Too much regulation and you stifle innovation. Too little and organizations are left vulnerable to attack. Yet that we find that sweet spot.
It's a challenge, no doubt. But I think by engaging in open dialogue and collaboration, between government, industry, and security experts, we can create regulations that are both effective and adaptable.
So we've talked about the need for better data lifecycle management. We've talked about addressing these resourcing challenges that security leaders are facing and the potential benefits and pitfalls of unified regulations. It's like a complex web of interrelated issues.
It is. And it's important to recognize, I think, that cybersecurity is not just an IT problem. It's a business problem. It's a societal problem. And increasingly, it's even a geopolitical problem. It impacts every aspect of our lives.
It's a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
That extends beyond the walls of any single organization. I mean, we all have a role to play in strengthening our collective defenses.
Absolutely. So I think a crucial question that emerges, as we move forward is, how do we shift from a reactive to a proactive approach to cybersecurity? How do we get ahead of the curve instead of constantly playing this game of catch-up?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that's been on my mind a lot throughout this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
How do we move beyond just reacting to the latest threats and start anticipating them? How do we build defenses before the threats even emerge?
Well, it's a very complex challenge, but I think there are some promising avenues emerging. One area that holds a lot of potential, I think, is artificial intelligence and machine learning.
AI and cybersecurity. That sounds like something out of a science fiction movie.
It might sound futuristic, but these technologies are already being deployed, to enhance threat detection and response capabilities. AI and machine learning algorithms, they can analyze massive data sets, identify patterns that would be invisible to us humans, and flag potentially malicious activity in real time.
So we're talking about AI systems that can learn to recognize and respond to threats before they even cause any damage. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
It is. They can sift through mountains of data at lightning speeds, spotting anomalies and potential attacks far more efficiently than human analysts ever could. So it's not a silver bullet by any means, but it does represent, I think, a powerful new tool in the cybersecurity arsenal.
Well, it's encouraging to hear that we're at least developing these cutting-edge defenses. But I imagine there are ethical considerations to navigate as well. I mean, we don't want to create a situation where AI systems are making all the decisions about cybersecurity without any kind of human oversight.
Right, you raise a very valid point. As we integrate AI into cybersecurity, it's crucial that we maintain human oversight. and very carefully consider the ethical implications. We need to ensure that these systems are used responsibly, transparently, and in alignment with human
It's
values.
like any powerful technology, right? It can be used for good or for ill. And it's really up to us to
Oh,
ensure that it's deployed ethically and responsibly.
Hmm.
So AI and machine learning are promising developments for sure.
Yeah.
But what about the human element? I mean, what role do individuals and organizations play in shifting to a more proactive security posture?
Well, I think human behavior remains a critical factor in all of this. It's essential for individuals to be aware of the threats, to understand the methods that attackers are using, and to adopt safe practices. Things like using strong passwords, being cautious about phishing emails, keeping your software up to date. These things can go a long way in preventing breaches.
it's about raising awareness and empowering individuals to be that first line of defense. But what about organizations? What steps can they take to move beyond just checking compliance boxes and truly embrace that security first culture?
Well, it starts with leadership. Organizations need to make cybersecurity a top priority, investing in robust security controls, promoting a culture of security awareness, and ensuring that security is woven into every aspect of their operations. It's not just an IT issue, it's a business issue that needs to be addressed at the highest levels.
So it sounds like we're talking about a very multifaceted challenge here that requires a combination of technological advancements, behavioral changes, and a fundamental shift in how we approach cybersecurity, both at an individual and an organizational level.
Yeah, that's a great summary. There's no single solution, no silver bullet. It's going to take a collective effort, involving governments, industry, security researchers, and individuals to build a more secure digital future. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up our deep dive for today. We've covered a lot of ground. We've seen the relentless tide of data breaches, the evolving tactics of cybercriminals, and the systemic vulnerabilities that make organizations so susceptible to attacks. But we've also seen some glimmers of hope in the advancements of AI, the growing awareness of the importance of cybersecurity, and the calls for unified regulations that could help to create a more level playing field.
I hope this deep dive has given you, the listener, a better understanding of the complex challenges that we face in cybersecurity. But more importantly, a sense of empowerment. Knowledge is power. And by understanding the threats and adopting proactive measures, we can all contribute to creating a safer and more resilient digital world.
Absolutely. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay safe out there.